Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. Claire Wasserman here with us. Ladies Get Paid, her brand new book from Simon & Schuster. Claire, nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. It's a brand new year. It's a fresh slate. And listen, financial goals are a big deal, whether you're an individual, you have a family, you have a spouse. People are always talking about money, and we don't talk enough about women getting their money and women advancing in their career. And this has been your business for almost 5 years now. So what was it like putting this book together?
Putting this book together was very meta. As I wrote about things like imposter syndrome and perfectionism, I was definitely going through it. And all of this comes from real women. I follow the lives of 9 real women in the book, and each of them is going through a different kind of professional challenge. Everything from sort of who am I, right? These existential questions of like, why am I here and what should I be doing? All the way through getting the job, negotiating the salary. I joke it's sort of like the life cycle of your career minus the retirement part. And it's showing you very tangible ways while also, I think, telling a very compelling story. But it was 320 pages of blood, sweat, and tears. And by tears, I mean many tears. It took almost 2 years of writing this. So I am just it's out there. It's a real thing. You're reading it. You have it in your hand. It's really surreal.
Yeah, it's cool that you have the book out there. You have the podcast, Friends Who Talk About Money as well. This is all helping people. It's super important. And I'm really curious for you, when did all this stuff click? Because for some people, it comes early in life and they realize, oh, wow, I haven't been doing enough here. Or it's much later in life where they're like, I haven't really gotten my stuff together. So when did things hit for you in terms of like, I'm going to take control here and really going to be empowered?
Yeah. I'm a community builder. I'm a marketer. I bring people together, mostly specializing in offline events, which is interesting now because we're online. I never considered myself a feminist, though. I think I had a completely misunderstanding of what feminism is. I was one of these people who thought, well, my mother, she was the third class of women in her college, but it's over now. I feel pretty, it's a meritocracy. I feel like it's pretty equal, which, by the way, is a very privileged thing to say. And it didn't, it was about 5.5 years ago when I had a sexist experience that kind of woke me up. And it's actually kind of a funny experience, really. I was at an advertising festival and I walked into a party. And this older man comes up to me, very lovely, and sticks out his hand and smiles. And he asks, "Whose wife are you?" Like, oh my God. I'm so grateful to this man that I had that experience because it was enough to startle me out of what I think was more of a naivete, but also not just naivete, things I was experiencing in my career, sort of awkward gender power dynamics, my own insecurity of pushing back, saying no, asking for more. I never recognized that as something larger than me. I knew nothing about systemic inequality. I didn't know the statistics around the wage gap and the leadership gap. And then the second part is, well, was it my fault? Right? Oftentimes we internalize things that happen to us. At this festival, it was just constant me trying to pitch business. I was working for somebody else and not really being taken seriously, or in a group of men, they would look at each other and not look at me. And I thought, well, I must be doing something wrong. And it wasn't until after the festival that I wrote a little essay about it. And by the way, the essay wasn't, this is what happened and I'm mad. It was, this is what happened and I'm trying to process it. I'm trying to understand why and maybe my own place in it. I shared the essay with some friends who all wrote me back and said, oh my God, I've experienced this too. A lot of it was small things, right? Now I have a word for it. It's called microaggressions. There is this entire vocabulary out there that I wasn't aware of. And it took, a full year of doing sort of researching. I remember Googling women in the workplace, wage inequality. Again, I knew nothing about this. And it was over 5 years ago. So I have to say, people weren't writing about it as much as they are now, where it's sort of cool to talk about this stuff. And it took a full year until I finally said, let's do something. Because when it comes to something that's systemic and overwhelming, as an individual, literally, what can you do? And I started by hosting events, got women together in a room and said, what does money mean to you? Because I knew it would really be a conversation about power. And that's what I wanted women to get.
It's a really incredible story. And sometimes it takes a startling experience to jumpstart something really amazing. And what you just said there really speaks to the title of your book, because the juxtaposition of ladies and get paid, historically, those two have not been together. And you talk about this in the book. So why was it so important to say, hey, these two things need to be together when they haven't been?
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that because, it took a little time to figure out the name of my company, which is Ladies Get Paid. And then, the book title was easy after that. And, so much of what I talk about in the book, yes, it is tangible advice about things like asking for a raise, but you first have to understand what might be holding us back. And that's really how we're socialized, which is be the good girl, be nice, accommodate others, put others before yourself, be grateful for what you're given. I mean, I really could go on and on. Well, I do go on and on in the book, but and so it's like, if before you could advocate for yourself, you have to deeply believe that you are worthy of advocacy. And that is going through all of the stuff of why am I holding myself back? Like, what does the word ladies mean? And it's, kind of understanding and undoing that. That's the first step before you can get to the here's how much money I want and I believe I deserve it. So, ladies, it felt a little tongue in cheek, a little sassy. Our branding's fun. We like the pink. Um, we don't take ourselves too seriously. And I think that's important because this subject is incredibly serious and depressing at times. So it just clicked and the URL was available for $12. So I got it.
It all came together and all these stories are weaved together in the book. What did you learn from some of these other women that you talked to? Because we're all trying to learn along the way here. So what was most fascinating to you?
It's a great question. I think first, besides the women in the book, we have this online network. We use Slack, and over 2 million messages have been exchanged
Wow.
in the last 4.5 years. I have had an incredible bird's eye view of women from all over the world. We've got over 120 countries represented. I see what they're talking about. So I've been able to get, I think, a really good sense of not just what women like sort of need in their lives, but what they, not just what they want, but what they really need and what the universals are. And I've gone across the country too. I've hosted town halls in 19 cities for women to talk about money and what money means to them. So the book is kind of those learnings condensed. And I think the thing that used to surprise me, but no longer does, but it is something that I get an email about every time somebody comes to one of our events, which is, wow, I thought I was the only one.
Hmm.
Not recognizing that no matter where they live, what they do, how old they are, the industry, I mean, a lot of this stuff is universal. And I think when they recognize that, they might feel a little down at first, like, oh man, this is, it's depressing. And then they recognize, if all of us are going through something similar, then we can band together. And it comes from speaking up. And that's why I think the women in this book are so courageous. I chose to change some details, but they were all ready to go. All of them, with except for two, have their real names in there. We really didn't change any details. They were very willing to be vulnerable because they realized that by sharing their story, that would allow other women to see themselves. And that was profound. And that's something I'm just very grateful to them and everybody in the community for doing that for each other.
These conversations are so critical, especially right now during the pandemic. And when you take a step back, I mean, everyone is affected in some way, but women have been really dramatically impacted by the loss of jobs all throughout the country. So when you think about what's happening right now, particularly for women in the workforce, what are some of the observations and thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I think everything, those who are the most vulnerable in our society have been hit the hardest. And a lot of women tend to be in service type roles, whether it's nails or hospitality or these things that are literally high touch. So those industries have been hit really hard. And then the women, folks who have got kids, childcare is expensive anyway. Now they're homeschooling. Usually the person who stays home is the one who either makes the least, so they're not going to be hit the hardest financially, or it's the one that gets to be the default caretaker. And that's how we're socialized. And it tends to be women. So many of them are either opting out or kind of being marginalized at work. So this stuff was happening anyway before, but it's just magnified now. Here's the positive part about what's going on. A couple of positive things. Though I do want to acknowledge everything's horrible and I'm not, that's a given. So here's what I think is happening that's good. This is a time of reckoning where we are realizing we need to have financial savings. We need to have better policies like minimum wage and paid family leave. We need to make sure our companies are set up for work from home. Workplace flexibility is something I tell all women, please negotiate for that. Because if you end up becoming the default caretaker, I don't want you to make less money. You just need to make sure that you have a schedule that can accommodate that. And you're not, the outlier at work asking for time at home and everybody's looking at you like, is she really working? So there's some behavior right now that's getting normalized that I've been saying for years, it needs, flexibility in the workplace needs to happen. That's great. Other thing that's great is a lot of women and maybe men too are rethinking, is this what I actually even want to do for a living? Right? Is whether or not they've been, squeezed out of the workplace, life is short. Life is short. And this is a time to really dig deep and figure out, am I doing work that is aligned with my values? And have I fully explored how much money I can make from what I do? Like this is a time of reset, which is very painful. There's a lot of unknown, but that's why I wrote the book that I did. And so if there ever was a time to figure this stuff out, I mean, it has to be now. And again, if you don't have financial savings, please start putting that money away because as we've seen, anything can happen.
Yeah, you definitely need that money for a rainy day. And whether it's 3 months, it's 6 months, 8 months, a year, whatever you can save goes a super long way. And you've encountered this with your podcast too. I mean, you've talked to people in their 20s and 30s. You've talked to people later on in life who've lost everything. I mean, it doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, savings really go a long way. So how can people start? What's a simple way if they haven't done it before, or if the money thing is such a big thing that it's such a big, bite for them to take just to begin, what can they do?
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioned in the podcast, some older folks. I mean, the couple, I know who you're talking about, this couple who lost everything. I want to mention they had a lot of money. Okay. Lot of money. So this is, and they just didn't really put it in savings. I think they believed it would always continue. So let that be a lesson, everybody here. I think, first of all, you got to look at your budget. At the end of the day, it's not really so much how much you make, but really how much you're spending. Because to the point of those folks, they were making a lot, but they still didn't have anything at the end. So there's a budget out there. It's a 3-part budget. I wish I'd made it up and could take credit for it, but I'm not. It's 50%. You take 50% of your post-tax income, and that goes towards the things you really need to live, right? We're talking about roof over our head, food, cell phone bill. You know what those are, okay? And you're taking 30% of that post-tax income and you're putting that towards the things that you want. Dinner out with friends, which is not going to happen in Los Angeles right now. Maybe you change that percentage a little bit, but that's sort of generally, those are the 2 buckets. So we've got the last 20%, and that's towards what I call being responsible. So the savings, the paying off debt, and these savings, by the way, put them in different categories. You can have savings that are specific to a house that you want to buy, savings that are specific to the emergency fund. And if that's going to help you kind of visualize in your head what this is actually going towards, I think that's going to be a lot easier than just looking at it like they're numbers. And then make them automatic, so you never have to think about it. There's so many apps out there. The last thing I'm going to say about it is high yield savings account. Okay, high yield. Put your money in places where you're making a lot of interest. And that includes investing your money. And I could go on a whole tangent about investing, because if you just leave your money in checking over time, due to inflation, you're actually losing money. So you want to put it in high yield savings and investments, because those are going to give you returns over time. It takes a lot of time. That's making money for you while you sleep. And I think a lot of men know how to do this, because there is an investment gap, just as there is a wage, leadership, and funding gap. So this is the thing. I'm writing the book specific to careers and making more money at work, but this is holistic, because once you get your paycheck, what are you going to do with your paycheck? Right. So that's the next book.
Well, why don't we hit on investing real quick? What are a few things that people can keep in mind, whether they know a little bit about it, a lot about it? What are a couple things right off the bat that are really important to know with investing, in your opinion?
First, it's a mindset thing. I think we often, when we imagine investment, or at least I'll speak for myself and a lot of the women in my community, it's, men in a smoking cigars in a club, or, a gentleman's club or something, or it's bros, in Patagonia vests at the, listen, I was at the NASDAQ. I went to the NASDAQ before, right before lockdown. And guess what? It was mostly men on the trading floor, just was. And it was really, really aggressive. And I was very intimidated. So there's, I think, this kind of like visual representation of what we imagine, a person who invests can be. There's also a lot of lingo. There's a lot of acronyms. That's intimidating. Who's getting a financial education in this country? If you're lucky, maybe your parents teach you how to do this. So don't get me started on like why our schools need to be teaching us this stuff.
I'm
So
right there with you on that. Yep.
so it's like there's the emotional component of do I feel like I could do this? There's then the like, literacy part of this. I don't even know how much, what I'm doing. And then I think there's this misconception that you have to be wealthy to invest. That is not true. Start with your 401k, especially if your company matches it. Again, that's free money. It's long term. It's not scary. If you put in a little bit money now and you try to take it out next week, first of all, you're going to get taxed. Second of all, you might lose money. So put that aside. It's about from age, whatever you are now. And if you're on the younger side, God bless you because you are in a great position to do this. All the way through, you're about to retire. That's going to make money over the long term. So I think people need to get out of the mindset of turning around a quick buck and that you have to put a lot in and that, that your company can't help you because they definitely can. If you don't have a 401k there, bring it up. This is a great way for a company to attract fantastic talent, to retain their talent. These are things you can negotiate for besides money. That's in the book. I call it full compensation. So again, this is holistic. And it's not just for people who have money and for people who wear Patagonia vests, which, I have one. It's in the other room. So certainly not saying anything about that. But no matter what you think an investor can look like, guess what? It's you. Look in the mirror. You can do it.
Well, the great news is that there are people out there like you, there are resources, books, pods, etc. And I can speak personally and say my wife and I are very glad we found your stuff. Claire, really nice to meet you. Thanks so much. And best luck with everything going forward, all right?
Thank you. Thanks for having me.